Hello and welcome to Getting Open. Wait, what? Getting Open, you heard it right. That is the new amazing name of our show. I am your host, Andrea Miller, and yes, you had been watching and listening to Open Relationships Transforming Together. We decided to make a name change because, as you can imagine, calling the show Open Relationships got a wee bit confusing to people. Even though it's always been about getting open emotionally and opening up in our relationships, our hearts and our minds to one another, it still caused a little bit of confusion. So we are officially getting open with me, yours truly, Andrea Miller, and we are so excited to continue to bring you an amazing show. Today, I have an incredible guest. If you are a parent with a teen or young adult, stay tuned. Or if you're a teen yourself or even a grown-up that has not achieved your full potential, you got to listen to Jessie LeBeau's story and advice because it is incredible. So let me introduce my guest, Jessie LeBeau. He is one of the most highly sought after youth motivational speakers and teen coaches. His unlikely underdog story has inspired over 1 million teens through his speaking events, best-selling books, and programs for teens and parents. Jessie is one of the world's premier basketball trick artists, which enabled him to star in Nike commercials with Kobe Bryant, in a movie with Kevin Durant, and even get hand-fed cheeseburgers by Ms. Heidi Klum, and so much more. These stories are insane. Jessie is regularly featured on TV, film, and international tours. There is so much for us to talk about in a 1 or 2 minute capsule. You've got such an interesting background. I think you'll do a much better job of just encapsulating that amazing underdog story. So if you don't mind just setting the stage for the rest of our conversation to get us started, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I've told this story hundreds, probably thousands of times, traveling around and speaking at schools, and normally it's about 45 minutes to an hour. So I'll do my best.
1 minute, yeah. Hello.
2-minute version of it. Long story short is I grew up on a little island in Alaska, and I took a boat to school every day. There was no roads or stores on my little island, and it was a very unique lifestyle, and I didn't even really realize it at the time because it was all that I knew. And my big goal, my big dream was I wanted to be just like my older brother, Luke, who was our local basketball star at the time. He was 9 years older than me, so I really looked up to him. And in Alaska, a lot of people don't know this, but basketball is the number one sport. And that's because it's cold and dark and snowy outside. So being in a warm, lit up gym in the wintertime is a great place to be. So the big obstacle, besides being isolated, for me was also that I was smaller than everyone else. Kids bullied me, told me that I couldn't be a basketball player. I have a lot of great stories of people being very enthusiastic, sharing with me why I would never make it as a basketball player. And I credit my dad for teaching me the power of my attitude and not becoming a victim and blaming other people, but choosing to go, you know what? I'm going to become the best basketball player I possibly can become.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, you're 5'8". I've seen different accounts of that. 5'8"-ish,
5'7", 5'8". Yeah, right in there.
5'8" with your heels on. Okay, Prince.
Yeah, exactly. Me and Oscar De La Hoya. So I ended up working hard and making it in basketball. I had a good high school career. We had a good run. I went to college and got my education paid for. And then afterwards, I heard about this thing called basketball commercials. And I left the fishing boat that I was working on in the summer that I was
in Alaska.
Yeah. And I was not good at fishing. And they let me know. And I told them, I think I'm going to go try to be in commercials and in movies and TV shows. And they all made fun of me.
Doing basketball, no less.
Doing basketball.
All 5'7" and 3/8 of you or whatever it is.
Right. Exactly. And they laughed at me and told me I was an idiot and I'd never do any of those things. And then about 6 months later, they were, and I know this is what happened because I saw an email that got forwarded to me. But the people that were kind of bullying me were at home and turned on the Laker game, and they saw me in a 60-minute commercial for Kobe Bryant, and it was the dream commercial. So that opened the door. Basketball allowed me to be in commercials and movies and TV shows. I've traveled the world with Allen Iverson as his teammate. Like you said, I got to spend a whole day being hand-fed cheeseburgers by supermodel Heidi Klum. Um, all sorts of just crazy things, movies with Kevin Durant, spin-off TV shows, Saved by the Bell, all these just crazy, crazy things I would have never imagined I would have got to do. And it was all because of basketball, the thing I was told my whole life I wasn't supposed to be able to do. And then that kind of led me to start speaking. And I'm out of my 2 minutes, so I'm leaving it at that.
That was good. That was good. You write in, you've got wonderful material all over the web, but I love this. It reminded me of that really wonderful, since we're just past the Olympics, a really wonderful commercial um, that ran in the Olympics. You said, I would go every day before school in the dark, and the janitor would open the gym for me. I spent my whole life in the gym, like literally my whole life, because of my school situation in Alaska. And it's so admirable to me that you put so much effort into it. And, you describe the relationship with your parents, and your siblings were quite a bit older, but I love that. Like, there was somebody in your life. And I think I actually heard that you did a keynote and just maybe even went back to your high school and gave like major props to the janitor. And I just
Yeah.
love that story, right? I mean, everybody can make a difference in the world, right? That to me, it's like, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You can make a big, freaking, profound difference if you have the right attitude, right?
Yeah. Yeah. His name was Larry. Larry is an incredible human, and he was the janitor at our school, and he should not have probably opened the gym before school to let me in.
You
It was
definitely
probably
shouldn't have, but I love the rule
because of
breakers.
the
We love
insurance.
the rule breakers, right?
Yeah. And I don't think that I would have been where I am today if it wasn't for him. So that was a really, really special moment when I got to go back and surprise him and bring him up in front of the whole school. He was still working at the same place, and the kids loved him. They came up to me afterwards, we love Larry. Like, he is so amazing. And I honestly didn't know if he would remember me, because I don't know, like, it wasn't a big deal probably to him, and it was a long time ago. But we had a special moment on stage, and he looked me in my eye. I'm gonna get emotional right now, but he goes, "I remember those days. Those were good times, Jess." And yeah, Larry is the real MVP, and you never know how just a small act of kindness can really transform someone else's life.
So you're super passionate about, and not even passionate, you've made a whole career over a long time, particularly motivated by how the loneliness epidemic is impacting teens and young people. You're especially passionate about helping struggling teens. Talk to me about how you think the loneliness epidemic is disproportionately impacting youths. And and I would love, just, I guess, two-part question, what you've seen, from the time you started doing this work to now. The iPhone, or, digital technology has become much more mainstream. Are you seeing more struggling youths and disenfranchised youths now? Is it about the same? So just, if you can dive in there. And, oh man, I always say my boys are 11, 14. They're great. I would never want to go back to middle school or high school. Like, I just feel like it's getting harder and harder, especially with social media. All right, I'm going to quit talking now.
No, there's a lot of good stuff there. There's a lot of good meat on that bone to chew. Man, it has changed so much in the last decade that I've been doing this. And what happened after the first couple years of getting in front of, if I'm doing 3 or 4 gigs a month at these schools, it's 1,000 kids, 1,500 kids, 750 kids. You start to hear patterns over and over again from the teachers, the principals, the parents, and the kids themselves. And what I started to hear, it didn't matter if I was in the big city or out in the country and it was more rural. The thing I kept hearing was mental health, mental health, mental health, mental health. And this is way before the pandemic came along and made it 10 times worse for everyone, in my opinion. And finally, after a certain amount of time, I was like, okay, we got to figure this out and look into this. And so that's what we did. We dove really deep, did a bunch of research, and all that research, all the data, all the experts, everything that we could find was that if we could improve confidence and self-esteem in a teenager, that it positively spilled over into every other area of a teenager's life, almost every area. Bullying, dropout rates in school, anxiety, stress, depression, self-harm, more likely to be a leader versus being a follower, caring too much about what other kids think. So that was like this light bulb moment of, okay, it's fun to go there for an hour and then play basketball with them afterwards because they all want to challenge me to one on one. And that's a lot of fun. They come up and they share this crazy things that you would never expect that a kid would be going through that are so unfair to them.
Or
And
share with a complete stranger, right? But
yeah,
you give them that safety and permission to open their hearts and really entrust in you, even though they've never met you before.
yeah. And I really think that comes from not talking about Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant and doing basketball tricks. Those are all kind of part of the formula. But it's more when I talk about being bullied and feeling lonely and isolated in a little island in Alaska where I couldn't have the opportunities of the things that I wanted to do. It's that vulnerability and humanity is where the kids really connect. They go, oh, that's just like me. I'm also an underdog and I can relate to that. And so, yeah, finally it was like, I want to do more than just be here and hang out for an hour or two because I would be going to the next city or school or heading home. And that's why we put together a whole program where we work with them and coach them for 90 days and we expose them to all these different life lessons. And a lot of them are things that parents are also saying at home. But the problem is, and you got one teenager and one preteen, so you're kind of probably experiencing this right now, as good as of relationship as I'm guessing that you probably have with them, they
Mhm.
don't want to hear it from mom, at
No,
least
they
not all
don't.
the time. But
No.
if there's someone that they're like, "Oh, I saw him on a TV show," or "He's friends with this celebrity or TikToker that I
Gives
know,"
you a little, social credibility over there, right?
all of a sudden, and even if there's not that, just not being mom and dad, sometimes it can be, there's all types of people who influenced my life that didn't do as much as Larry opening the door to the gym each day, but we're just like an older kid that played basketball at our high school who took a little interest in me and encouraged me. So it really is just putting awesome mentors in these kids' life who are consistent and care about them and make them feel seen and heard. Because if I asked you, like, who's the best role model for your boys? Who would you say out of curiosity? No wrong answer, no right answer.
For my son, my older son, Nicholas, he's been blessed with amazing coaches in tennis, in basketball, in football. He's a sports guy all day long. He's close to my brother, who's their uncle, and then my younger one, who's not quite as much into sports. I would say, outside of myself and my husband, I would say it's probably my brother, his uncle, right? But I mean, those
Yeah,
coaches can play a
people that he
really
knows
outsized role.
in person. Yeah, I love that, and that is so huge and so crucial. Unfortunately, a lot of kids who they're finding are these people that they connect with online, whether it's the streamers who are yelling crazy stuff and just being over the
Oh,
top.
there's that too in our house. I mean,
Yeah,
screaming, like
yeah.
literal screaming.
Yeah, and so I don't think, like, even, like, you try to find, like, an athlete or an entertainment person, there isn't someone that's like, "This is what I do," like, for teens. There isn't a Tony Robbins for teens, and so to try to fill that void of, like, well, let's create this space so that there is someone that people can connect with and look for good information to help them through anything, whether it's feeling lonely or whether it's making new friends at their school or dealing with anxiety or their mental health or any of the things that people go through when they're during their teen years.
Mhm. So what do you do? I mean, so for example, if you were in Colorado Springs, so if you were invited to speak at our kids' school, what would happen and what would your advice be both to the kids as well as the parents? You're probably telling the parents like back off. At least that's what I feel like a lot of us need to hear, because you're right. Like the kids aren't going to listen as much to us. But what would your advice be other than just back off your kids? Like, so as parents, we can really help empower them. And I heard you loud and clear about that confidence and self-esteem. How do you teach that?
That's huge. So I'll start with the kids. If I came and was speaking at that school, I'm really just sharing my underdog story, which you've heard
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
snapshots
Mhm.
of.
Yep, yep.
And in driving home, the most important thing that you could control in your life is your attitude. Attitude is everything. One man thought he could, one man thought he couldn't. They both were right. And we can't always control what happens to us. And unfortunately, bad things are going to happen in life. But you can always control how you use to respond with your attitude. You can get bitter or you can get better. And if you choose to get better, like when that kid bullies me and tells me I can't play basketball. But if I choose to get better, or if I choose to say, you know what, I will go and try to be in commercials and follow my dream of playing basketball and doing these things and not listen to these people and get better. There's no telling what you're capable of. And unfortunately, today, kids are so bombarded, especially through social media, of what everyone else's fake dream life looks like. And they feel
Oh
like they aren't
God,
enough. And they don't.
totally. So it's also fabricated, right? So much of it just feels so fabricated. It's that one little snapshot, and then you go, oh, FOMO, and oh, I'm not invited, and yes, go on, please. I just had to chime in and
Oh
say
yeah,
it's just the
I'm
worst.
with you. 100%. Yeah, it's so hard because people are comparing themselves to these highlight reels from other people, right? And it's hard enough. Most adults I know don't have a handle on this. So how is a teenager with a developing brain who's only known this world where we have technology like this, how are they supposed to combat a $1 trillion industry? They don't have a chance. And you have to put up systems in place of this is what you can use and this is how long you can use it, and it turns off and there's nothing that you can do about it, because if not, you'll become a zombie and you'll get doing that mindless scroll. And I like to point out when I go around with the kids that we work with, or the kids in my life, and look around, like look, everyone's looking down and on their phone. They could be talking to the person right next to them. They could be working on their basketball moves or their tennis swing or all these things and getting the edge on the competition, but they're wasting their life watching other people live a fake life rather than living an awesome life themselves. And it's hard because they don't know anything else. So that's for the kids. The real heart of the message is your attitude. You are the master of that attitude, and you can have it either make your life so much better, or you can be an unhappy, unfulfilled person. And I don't think anyone wants that for anybody. So,
Okay, I want to chime in here because on
yeah,
the one hand, I agree that attitude is everything. I think I've probably even said that, and you gave a really kind of beautiful upgrade to, I think it was Henry Ford. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Totally, I'm 1000% on board with that. And at the same time, when I think about um, when it's like, oh, you're just feeling so terribly, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're doom scrolling, and you feel isolated and alone, then what do you do? I mean, and I say that because when I think about the idea of just telling myself I'm gonna, like I can just buck up and do better. Like on the one hand, I agree that at the same time, is that real? I mean, is it realistic to say to kids, hey, you can do anything you want? I mean, now you did, right? So on the one hand, of course it's realistic, but you see the conundrum there a little bit.
yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I wanted to be an NBA basketball player, but I'm 5'7", can't jump that high, fairly fast, but not near as fast as those guys. So how do I have this dream if I am not going to be able to do the thing? And, with that, you can tweak your dream. So what could I do to still involve my passion, my purpose, the thing I love doing more than anything in this world, and find a way to make it be a part of my life and maybe even make a living out of it? I could be a coach. I could be a referee. I could be a trainer. I could work the score clock at games, and I shifted it into these things with commercials and movies and TV shows, and then ultimately using it to capture kids' attention with my speaking and make a living and still have basketball be a part of my life. So it's one of these things where maybe the ultimate thing isn't where you arrive at, but you can pivot and you can find something that still involves that thing that you love if you really want to do it, and find a way to make it a part of your life so you have that fulfillment.
Well, and in that regard, so bottom line is you worked super freaking hard. Let me ask you what might be a tough question. I mean, you were a teen and young man. I mean, you're still young. But do you feel like the sort of the tweens and teens and young adults you're working that you meet and mentor and coach now, do you feel like they lack the work ethic that you had and that I had and that I feel like so many in this older generation?
I don't want to generalize, but life has become much easier. So a lot of kids, the hardest obstacle that they've ever had to overcome is they got kicked out of a group chat, or the thing that they posted didn't get as many likes as they want. And now they're suicidal and harming themselves.
Yeah,
And
no joke.
hard
It's no joke.
it's hard not to look at that and be like, "How are you so soft? How are you so delicate? You're just this little flower and you can't handle any type of obstacles or adversity." But how can they if they've never experienced it and that's all they know? If that's the hardest thing that they know, then that's the hardest thing that they know. So, back to something you asked earlier, what can parents do is you have to let your kid fail. They have to realize that it's okay to fail. In fact,
Jesse,
most
say it
people
again.
let
Parents, you have to what?
let your kids fail within reason, of course. They have to feel the pain of not making the team or getting the grade or striking out. They can't get a award for breathing or participation trophy. They have to realize that's part of life. And the world doesn't end if you ask the girl for her phone number and she says no and the kids laugh at you. That is the key to success is failing over and over and over again. And every once in a while, an awesome thing will happen. And then you're like, oh, wow. And people will be like, wow, you're really killing it. You're really successful. And you're like, well, I just, I'm 1 for 100, but
Yeah,
I'll take it.
that's a little
And that,
Thomas Edison, right? I know the 99 things that failed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that's huge. And it comes from a place with parents with the best of intentions. You don't want to see your kids sad. You don't want to see them lonely. You don't want them to be the kid that didn't get invited to the birthday party, right? But at the end of the day, they need to learn these skills and then they need to bounce back from them because that's what life is. You and me know that. We have to do things every day, every single day that we don't want to do. I got to get up at a certain time. I got to exercise, which does not feel good during
Well,
the
you
time
gotta
when I'm
get out. I
home.
mean, to succeed like you have, and with a lot of hard work, like I have, that showing up and just continuing, to work hard and to overcome so many obstacles. There's no substitute for that. And and listening to you, what it strikes me is how much more passive life has become for a lot of people. What do you recommend? And by the way, for those kids who have the self-control to say, you know what, I'm going to put my phone down, or, maybe I'm in a group of wise, evolved, enlightened kids, and they all put their phones down. And we do see this, by the way. The kids will come over and they'll play basketball in the yard, or there will be those moments of play that we can see. Whew. But you also see, especially when they're alone and even when they're together, that they're all playing Fortnite in different rooms in the house. Like, not going to lie. So what do we do? Because that's like, these phones are meant to be addictive. So what do we do to counteract that? Is there an answer?
Yeah, and before we jump into that, I will say this. This is like a national campaign that we're rolling out, and we call it Team Up. And basically, the concept of Team Up is that you, me, all the kids out there, all the people out there, we are hardwired in our DNA to want to be a part of community. This is why we see people get into sports in the NBA. This is why we see them get into politics. This is why they get into veganism or hot yoga. You name the
We
thing.
want to belong. I mean,
You
that
want
is like the most primal thing. And I think just to shout this out, when you talk about struggling youths, and I felt isolated. I know you have that feeling of not belonging. It is the worst. It is just the worst.
we've never been more connected, kids today, but more disconnected. And that's why there's an epidemic of loneliness. You have to connect and spend time with other people in person who share the similar interests and passion as you on a consistent basis. You can't replace that through a screen. This is awesome. We're able to connect, across the country. But it isn't the same, like you said earlier when we jumped on here, like, "Oh, I wish I could give you a hug right now," and we would if we were there in person. You cannot replace that, and that's why we gotta get these kids off of these devices. It is literally ruining their lives, and they are not going to win this battle. So you asked for the solution. Here's what it is. Having that agreement, having that we like to say agreement instead of rules or
Oh,
contract in
ooh, I
place.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what your relationship with your phone is going to be and come up with that together. And I have a whole guideline.
Oh, and where should people go to find that? Jesse
You can
LeBeau.
go to theattitudeadvantage.com/welcome.
Okay,
That's we have that
attitudeadvantage.com/welcome.
yes, yes. And in there you map these out and you say, this is how it's going to be. And then you don't budge on it. And just saying, okay, 1 hour is what it's going to be, or 45 minutes, or this amount of time on weekends, these are the ones you can use, isn't good enough. Because, like you said, there's no one that I've ever met that has the self control, adult or little person, to be able to just, oh, I guess I'll just put this down and not get sucked into all the things that I find most interesting and are currently happening and that everyone else is talking about and responding to. I'm going to be the one person that's left out. And so you have to put systems in place that's after that time that you allot, and the less, the better. After it hits that time, that it locks them out, and no amount of passwords, no amount of them asking for more when you're out. And the other little thing I would throw your way, just because you're looking for other ways, is you got to model it in your own life. So you have to walk as a parent. If you're like, oh, don't be on your phone all the time, and then you're on there, on Pinterest or sending emails, or it's for work, or I'm doing it at the dinner table, they're watching and they don't care what you say. They're watching what you do. So you gotta walk the walk. That, from all my years of doing this, the biggest thing I've learned from talking to top psychologists, cognitive behavioral therapists, best-selling authors, parenting experts, the number one thing is you as the parent are meaning and patterning everything that they're going to watch. And when you think they aren't watching, they are watching. How do you treat your significant other? What do you do when the person cuts you off in traffic? How do you handle when things don't go well? Do you have that good attitude, or do you go the other way with it? So walk the walk. That's the most powerful thing.
Well, I'm just going to chime in there and say, when you say model it, to me, it's model getting off your freaking phone, right? And my younger son and I, we've started having like these really wicked backgammon tournaments, and that's like all IRL, and it's so fun. Oh my God, we're both so competitive. But so that getting off your phone, but I'm with you 1,000,000%. Just how you're showing up, right? I mean, and it's in so many ways, it's so obvious, and yet, we're so kind of pre-programmed, and especially when we're busy parents and we got to get lunch ready and then clean the house, and it's grandma's birthday and we got to get the kid. I mean, it's like, oh, like to be a modern parent is so hard. So when it's like, you're short-tempered with the person, that cuts you off in traffic, or you're a jerk to your husband, that's modern living. And yet you're right that, it's like our kids totally absorb how we behave. Right. So it's just a good reminder.
They're sponges. They really are. And so if you can lead by your example, that is the most powerful impact that you can have on their life.
Well, let me go just a little segue from there. You talk about how a lot of kids don't have mentors. Getting started in something new can feel really awkward. So what do you tell people? It's like, okay, showing up is 50% at least, but then how do you just give them enough kind of encouragement to stick with it to get good enough so that it's fun?
Yeah, that's tough. And that's how a lot of people operate. I think I'm guilty of that oftentimes myself. I'm not a big golfer. And it's like, oh man, I don't want to start at square one and really have to put in the time that's going to take to get good at this thing. And that's why people are drawn a lot of times to the thing that they naturally
That's
are
easy. Their
rewarded
cell
for.
phone.
Yeah.
Totally passive.
Unfortunately, the digital world with the video games that you're talking about earlier and social media, they don't translate to real life. So they spend all this time and we'll talk about it like, well, is it really like hanging out with friends and communicating when they're playing Fortnite in different rooms? If you ever listened to one teenage conversation while they're playing their games, there's no doubt that it is not healthy relationship or communication. It's just snack talking to the highest level. So I would push that off to the side. And I really think, you made a point earlier about how I think it was 70% of families economically don't know where the next meal or how they're going to pay their rent and living paycheck to paycheck. And here's what I would say to that. Because I've gone and talked about being an underdog in the poorest of poor places and the wealthiest and most affluent places, almost every single person can relate to being an underdog. I'm really close friends with a buddy whose dad is one of the most famous guitar players, speaking of guitars, in the world. And he's an awesome guy. And you would think on the outside, their house is on MTV Cribs. You could watch it. They had this amazing life. but his life is filled with all sorts of different challenges. And no matter where you go, almost everyone, you could go to the most affluent family and they're like, yeah, but I have a speech impediment, or I have no friends, or everyone's trying to use me. It's just different types of problems. And so I think the big issue we're seeing today is that everyone is so focused on themselves and their own problems. And therapy a lot of times exacerbates this because you're just ruminating over and over again with all the things that you're unhappy with in your life, which is reinforcing a bad habit. What we need to do is help kids and people in general go from I'm somebody who needs help to I'm somebody that helps other people. And when you make that shift in your life and you make that shift in thinking, you talked earlier about kids that are struggling and going through these different things. What can you do? Get them volunteering. Get them going and doing something for someone else. The key to living is giving. And all of a sudden, your problems don't seem as crazy or as bad when you go and you help someone else and you realize they don't know where their next meal's coming from and they don't have a mom and dad in their life. And there's drugs and violence and abuse. And those other people would give anything to trade places and have the problems that you have. We're too focused on ourselves. And whether it's you're stressed about going to the Ivy League school or something more lower socioeconomic of just trying to survive, going and helping other people and volunteering and serving others is an awesome, awesome solution that makes a huge difference.
Let me just ask you about this with regard to mentors. I'll give a little framing. My 14-year-old son and I were having dinner over the holidays 6, 7 months ago, 8 months ago now, I guess. And I don't even know what motivated me, but I was like, who are your role models? And he said, Rafa, Roger Federer. I'm like, Roger, like, I can see his face. Roger Federer, Steph Curry. He's a huge Chiefs fan, so Chiefs players and so forth. And then he said, Andrew Tate. And I almost fell out of my chair. And I'm like, whoa, like, what do you know about Andrew Tate? Really, really, I mean, violent, misogynistic, like terrible stuff. And there are others, I think Logan Paul and some of these others that have built very large followings that it's like they start with, hey, we're here to mentor and guide you. We're living the good life. Look at how fancy our cars are, how good looking our women are, like all that stuff. And they sort of position themselves as leaders and mentors, especially to young men. But then when you peel away the onion, you see really quickly, and especially as a mom of boys, you see really quickly how toxic that is. How much do you encounter that, and how much of a problem do you think? And I think you're also going to say, hey, that's what I'm telling people, get offline, right? But they're going to be online, to your point, like whatever age you let them access the internet, they can get into everything. So what do you feel like with these kind of people that position themselves as mentors, especially to young men who I would say are probably the most at risk, in terms of self-harm and then, being violent against other people?
That's the crazy thing is kids are so impressionable. And you can see these social contagions that go on and they ebb and flow. And all of a sudden, this thing is an issue that isn't even a thing that any kid that I ever knew of ever thought of when we were growing up. But now they're seeing it. And so you nailed it on the head. You got to get them off the internet and you have to protect. I remember my dad telling me when I was in the 7th grade, and he was a little bit devastated because I had told him in around that time that, hey, you're not my best friend anymore. And he always brings it up because it broke his heart. But that was part of me pushing the boundaries and growing up and finding myself. But he told me, he goes, you have to guard what you let into your mind because once it's in there forever. So now kid innocence is being taken from them at a younger and younger age. It used to be the issues that we talk about at schools are happening at high school. Now I go to middle schools, and these kids are making these decisions when it comes to drugs, substances, sex, all these different things. And it's now pushing into elementary school younger and younger and younger. So the unfortunate thing is that people are going to be drawn to the Logan Pauls and the Andrew Tate. And I think both of those guys have put good things in the world and they put not so good things in the world because they're flawed humans just like everyone else. So you have to.
Very diplomatic, Jesse.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth. I don't know any human that I agree 100% with good or bad. And I guarantee I could pull up clips that you would agree with Andrew Tate or Logan Paul that are really good things and really good advice. But some of these other things about how he relates to women, I wouldn't want my son or daughter to be taking those in as good advice. So you have to teach them, you have to have discernment, and you can't just take in anything that you believe or hear from a person in person or online. And so to kind of wrap it up, the unfortunate thing is I made 37 videos over the weekend, went out to LA about how to make a morning and night routine and how to surround yourself with awesome people, how to master your attitude, and 37 life lessons that every parent would want for their kid. And guess what? Those videos are going to get this many views compared to Logan Paul and Andrew Tate because they have TikTok brain, they're sensationalized, and they're about things that are more exciting and they have fancy cars in them. And unfortunately, kids are always going to be drawn, and adults too. We won't get into
Yeah.
politics, but we know people on both sides that are
Mhm.
absolutely out of their mind. You pick it, you pick the sports team, they're nuts, right? People are going to be drawn to what I call internet pollution. And so all I know is I can make a connection in person and I can put it out in the world. And the kids that, again, make the choice and have that hunger to do better in their life can have something there as an option. And it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but there will come a time in their life where they are looking for those things because hopefully they want to improve their life. And all you can do is put it out. Like we said, and see if the horse wants to drink.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, my last burning question, this is for the parents who have kids that are at risk, that, the kids, they feel like um, outcasts, they're having a hard time. And I feel like, ooh, that describes a lot of kids, right? Or to your point, they're in one day, they get kicked out. I mean, I've seen that with some of my own, kids in our world, and it's so painful to be ostracized or to not fit in. You've given a bunch of really good advice, but is there any one thing that you would say to the parents listening who are like, oh my gosh, my heart breaks because my son or my daughter are just really struggling with friendships and a sense of belonging in middle school and high school? Is there something that you can offer as help to those parents?
There was a point when I was doing about 15 calls a day, right around the end of the pandemic with parents whose kids were struggling. And I can say with supreme confidence, if you're a parent listening to this right now and you are dealing with a teen that's struggling, whether it's any of the things that you just mentioned with loneliness and not having friends, or they're anxious or stressed, self harming, or just not living up to their potential. And that's really frustrating because you know they're capable of so much. The biggest thing that I want all of your listeners to hear is that you aren't alone. And I don't want you to beat yourself up and know that you're giving it everything that you can. If you're listening to this right now, you're taking this time out of your life to see how you can improve as a parent, then you're in the top 1% of the 1%. There is with this is literally why we're doing this. There is an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah, this divide, this whole, they would call, was Eisenhower warned us against the um, military industrial complex, right? Now we have the technology industrial complex, and it's even more probably pernicious and invasive because it comes, for all the good. I mean, by the way, you communicate with a lot of people with your amazing online videos and your guides and so forth. So it's like, I mean, it's a little tricky. But on that note, what's the best way for people to find you? I also wanted to mention that you have a show out. Hang on one second. I'm getting to it. Oh, I had it here just a second ago. Okay, you say, what's the name of your show so that people can see you in action, helping young people, especially those at risk? And then what is the thing that you want people to grab, a free guide or something that they can really take advantage of all your wisdom and passion?
Yeah, so the show is Team Up with Jesse LeBeau, and basically it just shows us traveling all around the country in our basketball tour bus. We have a ton of fun, and it shows us going to schools and connecting with kids that we meet along the way and helping the families that need it the most. So it's so much fun. We play basketball all of these different things. And there was something that you were just talking about when it comes to the phones. Oh, so one last thing on this, since we're really getting deep into it here, is instead of just having these rules and boundaries and an agreement around it, if you can keep having conversations of why. And that's why you don't just take the phone away from them and never let them have it. And that's why your Jonathan Haidt talks about, hey, no smartphone till 14, no social media till 16, free play, no phones in schools. These are all important, but they have to learn and realize for themselves, hey, I actually want to make this decision that I am going to have boundaries around my phone, because if not, the phone will be in charge and it will rule me. And once they're 18, if they don't have the experience with these teenage years of practicing and learning, oh yeah, I don't spending 4 hours and not getting sleep on there, because the average kid is on there. How about this stat? The average 18-year-old spends 93% of their time awake
Oh,
staring at
good
a screen.
God. Oh
How are
my
you going to
God.
get anything if that's what you're doing? So they have to come to that realization on their own. And you can only get there by practicing, seeing that it's not good for you, and starting to make that decision for yourself. And honestly, most people still aren't going to make the right
They have a
decision
hard
because
time.
it's so addictive, but we can try.
Well, yeah, but I take your point. My husband and I have had this discussion a lot. Like, you don't want to create the forbidden fruit for impressionable teens, right? I mean, we've all seen kids go, where they come from a very strict, well-intentioned family, then they go off to college and they go crazy, right? Because they had all these rules and restrictions, and now on
I
their
went to
own.
Nazarene college.
Sorry?
I went to a Nazarene college. I know what you're
Oh,
talking
okay.
about.
Yeah, and so it's just back to, I mean, and it slows you down as a parent rather than just saying, "Hey, the answer is no because it's no, because it's good for you," or whatever. Your point is, again, don't be a lazy parent like I am sometimes. And by the way, I spend time too, like trying to explain the why, but this idea of just saying, "Oh man, if I invest the time now and am willing to face those headwinds, face those frustration, stay calm, stay cool, and have the discussion 500 times as needed," because sometimes, like in our family, we've had to have the same freaking conversation 500 times. On the 501st thing, it's like, oh, we got through, but that's parenting, right? And I keep it real, try to keep it as real, and put myself in the hot seat here because it's so hard, right? And sometimes it takes the 500 conversation for the change, whether it's the change that I'm finally making in my own life, or my child is making, or my husband is making. So I say that just because, to your point, you have to have those conversations, and that it's not all going to happen instantaneously. You're scaffolding for the future, but there isn't a shortcut, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's lots of little conversations. And even with that and the right boundaries and the good communication, it still isn't a given that they're going to make the right choice. You can do everything you can, but at the end of the day, every person is an individual and they're going to decide what they're going to do. And it's hard because it's so stinking addictive. This will be a Surgeon General warning. We will look back at these days and be like, we look back like, I can't believe we were marketing tobacco to kids.
There
That's
weren't
crazy.
seatbelts in cars. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, all
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah. And
Totally,
it will be that
totally.
with this, without a doubt. I'm beyond confident.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're in a big experiment right now in this age of civilization.
And it's
Jesse
not going
LeBeau.
well.
Yeah, no, we've got some headwinds, but you are here to help bring sanity and passion and wisdom. So I thank you for that, especially as a mom with teens. What you're doing is so important. I'm so glad I got to know you. I'm so eager for everybody listening and watching to check out all that Jesse has to offer. Again, not just the kids. Jesse talks about how people even older than him are saying how much his story inspired them to believe in themselves, to go from underdog to success. It all comes from within. Attitude is everything. Thank you, Jesse. And this is a wrap of the first episode of Getting Open with me, Andrea Miller. Thanks for tuning in. Give me your feedback on Facebook, on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you get this show. I would love your feedback. What do you love? What do you hate? Who are the guests that you'd like me to have on? If you follow and subscribe, that is so helpful to me. I'm bringing my whole heart along with my amazing team to bring the show to you. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.